episode 37.
Wait, what? It started? There was no countdown.
It started.
There was no countdown. Why'd you do that?
I just did. Decided to catch you off guard.
I really think that you are trying to gain a following with this podcast and then work me out of it and make it into your own thing. Like, you just set me up to just look dumb. Like, I was just sitting there staring at the camera and you're like, oh, episode started. I'm sensing some sabotage, and let me tell you, brother. Let me tell you, brother. It doesn't go unnoticed, so I'm going to do something about it.
You know what? You know what I think would help this whole situation?
Well, first, tell me how you feel about what you think, and then tell me what you think about how you feel.
I'd say you're exactly spot on, so I'm glad we're talking about this now on the actual episode because I'm sabotaging everything. But if I were sabotaging, I would sabotage and crash the whole thing versus try to take it.
So no, you wouldn't.
I would sabotage it completely to the point of utter destruction. Make it worth less than it already is.
If we were making bands, if we were making thousands, hundreds of dollars,
maybe tens of dollars, like tens
of dollars,
like maybe a couple tens worth.
It's maybe even six tens, $60.
Maybe even buy a tens unit.
What is that?
It's the sticky pads that you put on muscles and it like contracts them to help. Like, you've never used a tens unit?
No idea what you're talking about.
Really? Wow. All right. Well, this
sticky notes that you put on muscles?
No, they're sticky patches basically that you hook up to electrodes, and it sends electrical currents from a machine through these wires basically attached to sticky patches that you put on muscles, and it helps contract it.
Yeah, Jeff, I'll take
therapy.
I'll take shit that never existed for $600.
I'm about to share my freaking screen.
Well, before you do that, can I tell you something?
No.
I know what you're talking about. I was just messing with you.
Yeah, I was going to say, I will sabotage this podcast now. But all that to say, you know what I think would help this whole situation right now? Let's let some awkward silence pass for our audience before you give an answer.
There's a lot of things that would help a lot of situations. So you're coming at me from a multifaceted angle, I really don't appreciate it.
I'm going to give you the top one. Do you want to know what stop acting like a silly goose?
You know what? Bring that up one mo again. Bring that up one mo again.
One mo again.
One mo again.
One mo again.
That's that. That t-shirt will be available soon on the website. Or on the store.
Mo again. It's one mo, M-O, and then just like G-H-I-N, Gin.
No, Gen, G-E-N.
No, I disagree.
Brother.
Whatever.
I'm about from Shreveport, Louisiana. I think I have authority to speak on this topic more than you do. I'm not saying anything about anyone. I'm just saying I believe I have the pronunciation right. And, I have a life experience to support that. And I'm not indicating anything about anyone or anything that would, indicate anything past what I said. So get out of my face. Take that silly gooseness back to the pond, brother.
Well, I'm about to be in your face for about an hour recording this thing, so get used to it.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
Well, welcome back, everybody, to episode 37. All that to say, I hope you guys enjoyed the little tangential kickoff of said episode. It's been another big week.
Welcome back.
Been another big week on the Instagram and all the platforms. We've you guys are just awesome. We want to, of course, thank you all again for all of the support. It has been absolutely tremendous.
That's so
you guys are showing love, engagement, interaction. You're finding the stuff as interesting as we do. And we could not be more grateful than we are right now because you guys are just taking it.
We even appreciate the negative comments that we get on our posts because we're just like, hey, that's interaction. That makes someone else go, nuh-uh. And then you guys get into a fight for like 2 hours and we just get to sit there and watch it increase the engagement. So we love all of it. And just watching it in real time is so fun to do. It's so cool to because we were looking at it earlier and, we put a lot of work into really trying to understand how to do this in the best way possible. And we're definitely going to make mistakes and we're not going to be perfect at anything we do. But, we're very blessed. I mean, I saw, we have 78 posts right now, I think, right around there. Yep. And we've went from 800 to over 3,000 followers and right around
3,200.
Yeah, right at under 2 weeks. And I've not taking anything away from any other podcast that's out there. Everyone has something interesting to talk about and has an interesting way based on who they are to be able to talk about certain things. But I was looking at some other podcasts that have like 900 posts and they have sub 1,000 followers. And it was just not saying anything about ours is like, so much better or something of the sort. It's just so cool to see that happen at an early stage. Whereas, we were excited to get 500 views on a clip, in the recent past. And that last one is sitting right at 250,000. So that is just a constant.
Pretty cool.
Like I go back to that so many times during the day. I'm like, this day's not that great. It's like, but I'm going to be a famous podcaster soon. So it's not even that big of a deal.
Worth it. Another cool thing that happened on the note of gaining traction, it was pretty cool. My brother-in-law actually texted me last night. Shout out Grayson. And he said one of his buddies from college randomly texted him this video. And he's like, dude, I was scrolling through YouTube, came across this video, was watching it. All of a sudden, your brother-in-law pops up on this video, on this clip. And Grayson sent it to me. He's like, dude, do you kind of realize like what's happening? So I go in to watch the video. Keegan and I check it out. About 15 minutes in, we're going to give this dude a shout out.
Well, I just want to preface real quick before you keep going. Chase sent me this video while I was at the gym, and he was like, Grayson sent this to me. And I was like, this is definitely someone who just took a crap, or it's something really nasty. Or it is just something that is like a video that I don't inherently want to watch. So I was not going to watch it at all. The thing that you said was scroll to 15 minutes and then look. And I was like, okay, I'll scroll and I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah. So we scrolled the 15 minutes, and long story short, it looks like this guy's channel. He does different reaction videos based on interesting things like conspiracy theories or like mysterious videos, encounters that kind of pop up like out of the ordinary type things, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden 15 minutes goes by and we pop up, and it's our viral clip where we were talking about Project Bluebeam, voice to skull technology, all that stuff. And he was sitting there reacting to our content. And it was just really wild knowing stuff that we talked about. Yes, is getting traction, but enough traction to where another YouTuber with 350,000 subscribers is reacting to our content. So that was one of the most mind-blowing things, I think, besides having a clip that's gone viral, and we're not getting too big for our britches here. It's just add on.
I don't even wear britches.
It's crazy. Boxers or briefs. But just the aspect of this is so new to us and we're just experiencing it all for the first time. It is absolutely incredible, because I'm sure you guys, I mean, at least for the OG listeners, if you go back to the early days of Thoughtify, we started this podcast because Keegan and I talk on the phone every day, talk about all kinds of stuff, literally anything and everything. And one day we were just thinking like, what if we turn these phone calls into a podcast? So we tried it, and lo and behold, almost a year later, here we are. So it's just cool that for conversations and things that we enjoy talking about, you guys are also resonating with that, and it's just getting traction, and it's just so dang cool.
You know what was the conversation where we originated the idea the first time? Do you remember it?
What the conversation entailed?
Yeah.
Besides stating, dude, we should do a podcast.
So we were sitting on the phone. I was sitting on my couch in my old apartment. Chase was sitting in my lap. And we had I'm kidding. That wasn't the situation.
Don't go that
far. I'm sorry.
Some of that's
wrong
private.
memory.
Some of that's private.
Wrong memory. Hey, we're trying to be vulnerable with the crowd. Anyways, I was imagining Chase sitting in my lap, but we were on the phone for about 2 hours on an app looking at sharks. That there's an app called Ocean Search or O Search or something like that. Yeah, O Search, and they tag great white sharks and a few other different kinds of sharks. And wherever they pop up to a certain depth, that it will send them a where they are, a location
GPS
tag.
signal.
And you can look at the sharks. You can see like pictures of them. You can just watch where they've gone. And then me and Chase started just like zooming in on the most remote little islands that we could find and describing to each other how like, hey, go up to top about 30 degrees, go left, zoom in on, dude, this looks like a military base. Look at this. Because like there were so many little tiny islands that you're just like, what is this? Like, it's almost like it looked like a CIA island or something like that. And I remember in that conversation, we were like, dude, I bet someone else would think this is kind of interesting as well. We should like start a podcast or something like that. And then, about a year later, we're rich and famous and have about 3,000 followers. So take that, Jeff Bezos.
Boom. He wants to buy our podcast. Just kidding. That'd be cool if he did. But wanted to give a reverse shout out and feature to the guy who featured us, Mod Tricka. I think that's a 0 in his account name, but M0DTRICCA. So go check him out. Pretty cool.
Yeah, he has like over, like Chase said, he's like 352,000 followers, a good amount. And, he's got some cool content. It's crazy to me how content can be made these days and how you can literally just react to videos and people like watching it. And we were really appreciative that he put us, because I mean, shoot, that video had 23,000 views within 2 hours. And I think last time you checked it,
it's 170,000 now.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was just from an exposure standpoint, even though we were 15 minutes in, I mean, heck, that was better than any marketing we could have paid for.
Not too shabby. But yes, all that to say, thank you all. You are all awesome.
Thank you for every like. Thank you for every comment, every interaction. And it has just empowered and encouraged us to keep going. And we're really going to turn this into something big. So we're excited for the people that have been with us since day one.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, shall we dive in?
We shall dive in. So we have an interesting Thoughtify thought for you guys this week. And honestly, we have come to the realization that our Thoughtify thoughts have no real time limits, and it essentially becomes the episode. So the Thoughtify thought is most likely going to be what takes up most of the time. But in case we get through it, we've got some other things to introduce that I think you guys will like. But
absolutely. Do you want to, for those that haven't listened to Thoughtify Thoughts, do you want to give the breakdown as to what it is?
So I'll say what it is, and then you say the question. So Thoughtify Thoughts are an interesting topic that we want to not necessarily debate, but just discuss. And we're both open to one of us disagreeing or agreeing, or both of us agreeing, whatever it might be. And just go through the details of it, explore its validity, explore the history of it, and really just try to put legs under it in terms of, hey, is this something we should believe, or is this something that has the ability to be believed, whatever it might be. And we came up with 3 questions that we thought would be really good, topic, really good ways to expand on the topic as we're talking through it. And what are the questions again? It's
what's the wildest way this will play out? Yep. How would this change your daily life? And who benefits or suffers from this being real?
Yeah. So I think, those are going to be 3 really, for this one especially, I think that it's going to be a solid. I live right next to the dog park, so I can just see people walking in and out. And I'm just like a spy. I'm just like, what are you doing?
But yeah, people can just peer through and see you rocking back and forth.
Yeah. And man, that was my neighbor that I had asked for her number, and she gave it to me, and then I texted her a couple of days later and she never texted back, and now it's just really awkward whenever we see each other. So back to these Thoughtify thoughts, because we're not talking I want to talk about it, but I do want to go talk to her. I'm doing a podcast.
You should send this episode to her when it comes out.
I hope she becomes a fan and then regrets her decisions. That would make me feel a lot better.
But this week's Thoughtify thought is the Shroud of Turin. And we'll give a little bit of a background kind of summary before we dive into it, just so you guys who don't know what it is kind of get caught up. So the Shroud of Turin first appeared in historical records in the 1350s in Lille, France, when Geoffrey de Chaulnes displayed it as a cloth bearing the image of a crucified man, claimed to be Jesus Christ's burial shroud. Its origins before this are kind of unknown, with speculative links to earlier relics like the image of Edessa. And then in 1389, Bishop Pierre d'Arcis called it a painted forgery, but the shroud gained devotion. It passed to the House of Savoy in 1453, was moved to Chambray, and then to Turin in 1578, where it remains. A 1532 fire caused damage years later, and its 1898 photography by Secondo Pia revealed a detailed negative image, which is where this generated significant interest because that negative image sparked what is kind of known as the Shroud of Turin today. So all that to say, it's kind of early history remains really murky. No one fully knows what it is. There's been a lot of carbon dating that's been done. Some pinpointing it to about the 1400s, but then again, it's not for sure, with some speculation and observation dating it to the first century. Basically, all that to say, it's fueling ongoing debates about its actual authenticity. So, before we actually kick in, I do have a picture I want to pull up to show you guys so you can see what this looks like. So I can show you here.
Yeah, and it's a man, it is one of the most heavily debated topics in regards to it being a real thing. And man, I'm reading right here, and this is the picture of it, which is, you look at the picture and you're just immediately like, man, that is a very clearly defined image of someone on a cloth, when at the time where there are no ways to get images onto anything outside of painting it on there. And I'm reading right here, and we're going to go through the supporting evidence and the
Some of the
disagreeing,
controversies.
the evidence of the contrary. But one of the things that immediately popped out to me was in 1389, Bishop Pierre d'Arcis wrote a memorandum to Pope Clement the V11, I don't know what that is, calling it a painted image whose maker had confessed. This document and its status are still debated. Clement allowed it to be shown as a representation, not as the actual burial cloth. So that's interesting. But before we start diving into that, I just want to get your opinion. What's your take? Just without having looked at anything. I know we researched it a little bit before, but what's your initial take when you see this?
I mean, it's interesting. And I know that's a very cliche word to use, but just looking at it, I mean, the fact when the x-rays popped up from when it was photographed in the late 1800s to kind of, I guess, give us this negative view of the shroud itself. I mean, we've heard on and off stories as to like what it is, how that's even possible for like the image to be burned into the cloth, basically. And that is only caused by sincere, like piercing, radiating light. For it to have left that mark on said cloth, if it is real, it's only possible under extreme, extreme light. So I find that really interesting, even if it is fake, right? Just understanding, okay, in the 1300s, the 1400s, when it was discovered, how is that even possible, like painting that? Because before it was just a shroud. And then under that x-ray from the photograph, it revealed, all the extra detail as to what we see today. So I think overall, it's just, man, it is an absolute mystery, and I find it very intriguing.
My initial take on it is the fact that it's, like you said, extremely intriguing, but the chances, like my thing is like, how did it get from Jesus's time to the 1300s when someone found it? That would be my big thing, because there's so few things that are naturally or even intentionally well preserved from that time, that it's got so much it has so many interesting aspects to it that we'll talk through here in a second. But and I do really lean more towards it could possibly be that, but it's like the idea that it would be, she's cute. The idea that it would be actually Jesus's, and there'd be no notation of anyone who took it, or it wasn't mentioned by any of the apostles. It's just one of those things where I'm like, that's a pretty big deal. And there's like pieces of the true cross, which is very heavily debated. I remember we had one in high school because I went to a Catholic high school, and we had this little tiny sliver in the Catholic church, or the cathedral, that was apparently a piece of the true cross. And relics like this are just, there's two over tendencies that I really don't enjoy. One is the over tendency to try to make it real, and the other is the over tendency to try to make it not real. And there's very few people that land on middle ground and go, okay, it's actually really interesting, but we just can't say anything. It's usually just like, no, there's no way, Jesus wasn't even real. It didn't even blah, 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 blah. Or it's like, this is Jesus's, you should pray to it 7 times a day, or, just some fanatic stuff. So it's hard to find people in the middle that are just viewing it from purely an objective standpoint. But my take on it is it's extremely intriguing, but my biggest ask towards supporting it as being what they say or what they want it to be is identifying how it got from Jesus's time to the 1300s, protected and unscathed.
And just showed up.
Showed up in a box somewhere.
Oh, and I mean, adding on to that, the bishop at that time, Pierre de Arcis, sorry for all the French listeners out there. We don't speak French, so apologies if we butchered that. But however you say his name, Bishop Pierre, I will call him.
Yeah.
Called it, a painted forgery, all this stuff. So, and this could be a controversial take, but looking back to the time of Copernicus, where he was looking like at that time, it was a geocentric society. Everyone believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system.
Wait,
and Copernicus.
What do you mean? What do you mean everyone believed that then?
It was a generally accepted principle, like the church believed that the Earth was the center. Everything revolved around the Earth. Geocentrism.
Is that not how it is?
No, we revolve around the sun.
What?
You're joking.
I'm kidding. Go on. Sorry.
Yeah, you're joking. I wasn't going to fall for that time.
I had you going there for a second.
No.
Yes, I did. You were like, it's geocentrism.
No, I was like, you need to go back to school.
You need to go back to the pond with your silly goose antics. I'm not dealing with it.
Stop that right now. Oh my gosh. I told you not to do this on the recording. But all that to say, at the time, everyone believed the Earth was the center of the solar system. Everything revolved around the Earth. We were the center. Until Copernicus got up and he's like, actually, guys, no, that's not the case at all.
And they're like, we're going to murder you for that opinion. So don't say that out loud.
Well, and that's the thing. He got met with significant resistance from the church at the time. So I'm like, if you do anything to challenge certain beliefs and standards that were a thing leading up to that point, especially back then, you were met with heavy resistance. So all that to say, I get maybe where Bishop Pierre was coming from. Of course, playing the careful card, right? You can't just be like, oh yeah, that's totally what it is. But at the same time, there has been a history. Copernicus learned it of, how much resistance he was met just from a geocentric perspective versus heliocentric.
Well, dude, I will say that this is a side tangent where we got to stay on topic. But if people could still murder each other as easily as they could in the past, in terms of,
my gosh,
I mean, that would have happened to Randall Carlson very long time ago, because they had the entire community of archaeologists just tried to smear his name, just make him like an idiot. And hey, some of the stuff he talks about, he was wrong about. Oh yeah, Graham Hancock, my bad. Not I always Randall get Carlson those guys
confused. Same,
yeah, me as well. But yeah, it's only for the existence of laws and ability to enforce those laws that people are not killed for having differing opinions like that. They're just like, you're telling me that you don't believe what I believe? Oh, here we go.
It's an act of war. It's an act of treason at that point.
Yeah, it would have definitely. Yeah, if you came forth with some of this stuff today, or what we're talking about today, back then, yeah, you would have been definitely put in your place, which is 6 feet in the ground. But continue with what you're saying. I apologize.
No, I'm just saying that was it. In addition to your point, it's like the church at that time, not saying that was the only time stuff like this happened, but from another instance in history, Copernicus coming out and saying, we revolve around the sun. And the church is like, what'd you say? There's basically,
say it again, boy.
So all that to say how Bishop Pierre kind of called it a forgery and tried to pass doubt and all this stuff. Like, I get being careful.
Yeah.
But at the same time, anything that could have come up that might be legit, we're not saying it is, but anything that challenged the status quo, individuals were met with heavy, heavy resistance at the time. So all that to say, really intriguing stuff. I would be heavily curious, like you were saying, from first century, how did we just get to the 1350s?
So one thing that I want to point out that Chase said is you said it in other words, but it could be true or it could be not true, because we will say things on this podcast and then people just like take it as their chance to make a stand for one thing in life that they're going to just put all their energy behind and leave the most mean comments. And we're just like, dude, we literally said, we're not saying it's true. We're not saying it's not true. We're just exploring it. We think it's really interesting. But
for those people that watch 10 seconds out of a 60-second clip, those are the people.
Exactly. And they're just like idiots.
We're calling you guys out.
This has all been already disproved. I'm just like, dude, like just watch the whole clip. Yes, we literally give disclaimers. But here's another thing that kind of bothers me about it. So it appeared in 1389, right? In 1453, that's 1,000 years later.
100.
Oh, sorry.
Years.
Gosh, so sorry. That's three. That's That's 3 million years later.
3 million?
I meant to say 100 years later. 100 years later. 100 years. Think of that, and especially back then, like 100 years. That was, a lot of time. Happened. In 1453, the cloth passed to the House of Savoy. It was damaged in another 100 years later. It was damaged in a 1532 fire in Chambéry when molten silver scorched the folded linen. Poor Clare nuns repaired it in 1534 with triangular patches and Holland cloth backing, both removed during 2002 restoration. The Savoys moved it to Turin 1578, where it remains. So that's, I guess, since we removed it in 2002, that would give me more confidence to understand, because I'm like, if we're looking at stuff that was put into it, then that just kind of attacks the whole validity.
And then that's just the whole thing.
Go on.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, go.
Well, just a second thing to introduce is that photography and modern study. Words. Yep. In 1898, Secondo Pia's photographs revealed the image behaves like a photographic negative, like you had mentioned. Improved photos were taken in 1931 and 1978. An interdisciplinary team, STURP in all caps, examined the cloth on site. In 1989, Nature published multi-lab radiocarbon dating of AD 1260 to 1390. The 1997 chapel fire led to a long architectural restoration, reopened 2018. The cloth underwent a controversial 2002 conservation. Patches removed, like I just mentioned. Public showings occurred intermittently. So essentially, that was just calling out the photography part of it and some studies that have been put into it. But I think, as we'll get into, that radiocarbon dating has been heavily disputed.
Yeah. Well, and carbon dating's good, but there's flaws to it, just like everything. So,
well, not just flaws. Carbon dating is very often, and I don't want to say very often, but carbon dating has an extremely high likelihood to be wrong. A lot of times, actually, let me just look up real quick why, because I'm not going to try to sit here and talk out of my butt and make stuff up. Carbon dating is a powerful tool, but like any scientific method, it has limitations that can make results less reliable if those limits aren't accounted for. Here are the main reasons it can be wrong or misleading. Contamination. If a sample is contaminated with newer carbon, like handling, conservation chemicals, rootlets, or groundwater seepage, it can appear younger than it really is. Conversely, contamination with old carbon, like limestone or fossil carbon in groundwater, can make a sample look older. Limit of age range. Carbon-14 has a half-life of about 5,730 years after 50 to 60, 5,730 years. After 50 to 60,000 years, so little remains that it's almost impossible to get an accurate measurement. That's not really relevant here. Variations in atmospheric carbon-14. The ratio of C14 to C12 in the atmosphere hasn't been constant through time. Calibration with tree rings, corals, and other data corrects for this, but if calibration is not applied, dates can be off by hundreds or even thousands of years. Reservoir effects. Organisms can get their carbon from sources depleted in C14, like shellfish absorbing dissolved ancient carbonates from seawater, or freshwater animals in limestone areas can look much older than they are. This is known as the reservoir effect. And the last two, sample type issues. Charcoal, bone, wood, peat, textiles, and shells all preserve carbon differently. For example, bone often loses organic collagen and picks up contaminants. So that's, textiles, obviously, which that would be, loses it differently. Measurement uncertainty. Even in ideal conditions, there's always a margin of error, commonly plus or minus 30 to plus or minus 200 years, depending on the sample and technique. Poor lab practices, sample sizes, or low carbon content can increase error. So that actually just makes me upset about any type of carbon dating that's ever happened and that people have brought up, because that there says there's like 6 or 7 things that can totally change that and make it look like something it's not. So unless carbon dating for anything is proposed with, hey, we've also verified that these factors have not been in play, it just it kind of throws it. I don't want to say throws it out the window, but it's just how many times have stuff been carbon dated and people just run with it and they're just like, that's what it is. And you never hear any follow up on the actual topic of was that true? Or was there any contaminants or anything of the sort? So all that to say that original carbon dating, I believe, has been heavily disputed in the Shroud of Turin. And, they've even found pollen that only grows in the area where Jesus was crucified on the shroud as well. So, but I still have my own reservations around it. But in terms of it having the initial disagreements with it, I feel really were overused and undersupported.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And it reminds me of just the general archaeological perspectives that we have in modern day archaeology. Like anything, there's heavy reliance on certain aspects and techniques, right? But when those techniques still have inherent flaws and you try to bring that up to individuals that's ride or die by it, I mean, it's kind of like that's all we're told to go by, and we're supposed to believe it all. When inherently there are flaws in, for perfect example, archaeology wise, carbon dating. Like there's such a heavy reliance on that being like, this is so accurate. Trust us when we say we carbon dated this, it goes back to this time. Well, after just going through what you went through, how inherently invalid or wrong could carbon dating be as a result too? But yet no one ever talks about that. So we're just supposed to believe everything we're told.
Well, let's look through real quick the evidence commonly cited in support and authenticity. So I'll go through, there's 5 points, and then do you have points against it?
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of the 5 points that mostly support the Shroud of Turin being authentic or real, is first, STURP, I forget what it stands for, overall findings 1978. Images is that of a real human form, not the product of an artist. No pigment binder layer was found forming the body image. Blood areas test positive for hemoglobin, serum albumin, serum albumin. That is 2 words.
Sounds like an actress.
Yeah, really, serum albumin. Gosh, that's messing with my head. ALBUMIN, albumin. That's
albumin.
That's weirdly hard to say. Image mechanism remained unsolved. Source STURP summary page, peer-reviewed optics papers from the 1980 issue of Applied Optics. Okay, I don't even know what that's saying. Number 2, negative/3D behavior. Early digital optical analysis showed the intensity profile can be rendered as relief, unlike typical painted images. Supporters argued this points away from conventional artistry. The third one, forensic/medical congruence claims. Some medical/forensic writers argue that the scourging and wound patterns, crown of thorns, side wound, nail placements, are anatomically plausible and consistent with Roman crucifixion, including flows that appear clot-like before image formation. There are also peer-reviewed challenges to this. See the Borini and Garlaschelli study under against, which we'll have that here in a second. And if you don't have it, I'll say it as well. Image superficiality and chemistry. Supporters lean on extreme superficiality, color confined to the outermost fibrils, arguing this is hard to replicate with pigments. Several groups have explored a non-contact or radiation hypothesis, e.g., excimer UV or burst-like processes, though these remain speculative. And the last one is recent non-radiocarbon dating attempts, and it has in parentheses contested, of course. WAXS X-ray microfibril studies 2022 suggested an ancient age, first millennium, from crystallinity reticular strain. Critics say sampling and method validation are insufficient. Statistical reanalysis of the 1988 14C raw data report, heterogeneity among, they're killing me with words
today. That's a heck of a word.
Heterogeneity among subsamples/labs and spatial age gradient in the sample region, argued to reflect non-representative sampling or contamination/cleaning differences. In parentheses, they don't redate the cloth, they question the sampling. Okay, so they're essentially saying you guys did not take an accurate sample to even date it. Okay, so those are
interesting.
Those are the 5-4. Their overall findings: the negative 3D behavior, forensic and medical congruence, image superficiality and chemistry, and recent non-radiocarbon dating attempts. So now, but here's one thing I really think as we're looking this stuff up, I feel like the information that we're being fed is naturally going to try to lean towards it not being real. Like everything, there's not one thing in here that has in parentheses like this might, like
this could be.
Yeah, like everything is like heavily debated, or it's just like, especially when you get to things around Christ, anything you find online is just going to be like, nope, not true. That's biased. Not proved. And it's the other thing is like when you look at the lack of evidence in other situations, for instance, like who is it? Alexander the Great. It's disputed whether or not he even lived and was real, but it's so heavily leaned on that he was real because we have all these stories about him. But when it comes to Jesus, they're like, no way. It's just like, I hate that double standard in this, in these specific conversations.
I agree. I will say, as we're going to go through some of the arguments against it being real, I mean, we referenced a few of these and we talked about them previously, but there's not. Let me just go through them and then we'll talk about it. How about that before I try to start talking on my own 2 feet? And like we said, audience, when we kicked off this episode, we are not saying it is. We are not saying it isn't. We are merely going through both sides and showing some of the main points for, some of the main points maybe against. Again, we're not saying it is. We're not saying it isn't. So before you go all clickbaity and go off on us, we're prefacing it again. Not saying that for everyone, but for the few out there that want to ruin it.
One more time. One more time. Are not taking a stance. We both very much believe it could be real, and we both very much believe it could be not real or not authentic to being the actual cloth that went over Jesus Christ, who I will die by this statement. Jesus Christ was a real historical figure, did exist.
Absolutely.
Regardless whether you believe in his divinity, there's more historical and circumstantial evidence for Jesus than most historical figures that we all agree were real.
Absolutely.
That stuff makes me upset.
Boom. Mic drop. All right. So the main arguments against the Shroud of Turin being a first century relic include number one, we just talked about it, radiocarbon dating. A 1988 test tests it to roughly date around 1260 to 1390 AD, suggesting medieval origin. Number two, no early records. No clear documentation exists before its 1354 appearance in Liry, France, which we kind of alluded to that originally. Just the aspect of, okay, well, where was it the first 1300 years? It just was in Jerusalem, and then all of a sudden it just pops up in France. Number three, medieval skepticism. We talked about this too. Bishop Pierre called it a painted forgery for profit. If they're going to use that as a main point for skepticism, that's the exact thing that we just talked about regarding Copernicus and the church and geocentrism versus heliocentrism. You're going to be met with resistance. So I don't lean on that one too much at all. Number four, artistic features. The image's clarity and lack of wrap distortion suggest medieval artistry. Point five, there's questionable evidence. So pollen and weave claims lack rigor. Bloodstains seem a little too pristine for it to be real, per this argument. Number six, there's a relic culture. So 14th century Europe produced many, many, many relics for pilgrims, fitting the shroud's context. Number seven, there's weak counter studies. So alternative dating, e.g. referencing Fonte's 2013 study, lacks scientific credibility. So as a super short, brief overview, those are seven of the counterpoints to that. A few of those we did talk about before regarding the carbon dating, Bishop Pierre. Like I could argue against those, for multiple reasons like we've discussed. So I wouldn't actually count those as legitimate instances to factor into this argument. But some of the interesting ones that I do find intriguing are the whole historical documentation. Like, how did it just pop up from early first century and all of a sudden it's in the 1350s?
Well, I feel like that is a very easy way to discredit anything ever. That's like a go-to, hey, what about the Ark of the Covenant? And it's like, well, there's this time where it was never talked about, and that doesn't support. It's like, okay, but there was a time where it was talked about. And just because you specifically haven't found evidence, maybe people didn't know what they were carrying or know what to, maybe one of the things that really kills me that people will say about the apostles is they'll say, they wrote all this stuff down and years and years later, and if it was that big of a deal, why did no one write it earlier? And I'm like, because 98% of people in the old world didn't know how to read or write. That was not a common skill. It was a very sought after skill, and you were employed for it to be able to write and read, especially in multiple languages. And the idea that anyone would go home and write something down, their day-to-day life in no way connected to needing to write something down to show it to someone else. It just wasn't part of the culture. It wasn't how they passed information. It was definitely still a thing that was meant for certain people who had that as part of their job. So it is valid to say there's a lack of historical evidence in a certain time gap, but that also the exact same argument can just be flipped on its head and say, well, there probably is evidence, we just haven't found it yet. And they're both just overarching statements that try to reach the point without giving anything to really prove it or really actually support it. So it's just, I think that one is a redundant argument.
I agree. So 3 of them struck down right there based on our opinion. Yeah. And here's the interesting thing about this. Questionable evidence regarding the pollen and weave claims, saying they lack rigor and the bloodstains seem too pristine. I'm like, okay. And to your point, anything that is talked about history-wise or, evidence-wise, people always tend to go, I don't say always go against the grain of Jesus, but in an aspect of, yes, Jesus was fully man and fully God. So when it shows the bloodstains seem too pristine, would you not potentially think of, Jesus just resurrected, right? And that shroud, if it was the actual shroud that covered his body, when he came back to life, that whole process, whatever that looked like, what if that just revitalized and like rejuvenated his blood, in a sense that those stains that eventually dried on the shroud, yeah, okay, you say they seem too pristine, but what if that was because of his resurrection?
Well, I don't get what I don't get what you're saying in terms of how
It's
would
like when
that,
they seem too pristine, like it's too perfect,
what,
like
how would
for it to
how
be
would
actual
him,
bloodstains.
but like, I don't understand what you're saying in terms of like anything that happened in between the blood stain being there and him being resurrected that would make it, I would
Well, like
say that would
when he
make a
was
stain more imperfect if there was any like, um, you know, if you died and the shroud is on you and you're bleeding into it, or your blood is on there and it's soaking into it, any movement or anything that happens past that point would make it less perfect. So, like, what would the resurrection in terms of like, how would that make it any
no, I'm
better?
saying when Jesus, like whatever the process was or how it happened when Jesus came back, not how it happened, but when Jesus came back to life, those stains, because it's a dead body, right?
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to bleed out and everything. But when they say it seems too pristine, like I want to know what their definition of pristine is. Like, what does a perfect burial shroud of with blood stains? What does pristine look like? I mean, in all transparency, like I want to see what is their definition of pristine in the first place. Does that mean it's perfectly laid out in certain spots? Or does that mean the blood itself, the blood stains have been preserved to a certain pristine sense of time that has lasted through the years, hundreds of years, thousands of years? Like, what does pristine actually mean, for one? Because if blood stains seem too pristine in the sense of they've been perfectly preserved, you could argue that upon Jesus' resurrection, what if the resurrection power, when Jesus rose, he had that sense of rejuvenation, and
Yeah.
those blood stains that came from him were,
Yeah,
i.e.,
they
rejuvenated
essentially
because they
embody
came from
the
him.
image in some way, shape, or form. I think while your point is valid, it's only operating in speculation in terms of like we don't
Right.
know, and we're going off
Just like
of more
this.
of we don't know, and not that a
Right.
lot of this conversation isn't anyways, but I more of lean on a couple things. One, if it's an artist rendition, it is a very poor. It's not there. There's nothing really there. It's not something that an artist would like put a like it seems too not good to be someone's intentional work in terms of like the image being there, and it's like, okay, well, you could only see that image with technology that you did not develop until thousands of years later. So
Right.
what would be the point? Or a lot, hundreds of thousands, a thousand years later or something, years later, whatever. What would be the point of like creating it as a piece of art? I just don't like. In my opinion, I'm just like, there's no real creation there. No one. And the other thing is like the other part that's there can only be viewed with technology that didn't exist at the time. So it's not like someone's going to be like, I'm going to make a negative image of this so that when someone looks at it, they'll see this in there. And then the other thing is, if they're saying that it is too pristine in terms of like the way the blood is stained on there and the like, okay, then show me what it should look like, because
That's what I'm saying.
I think there's a much higher likely, and not you're saying in terms of preserved the blood, like the blood being testable and preserved. I'm saying, and we might be saying the same thing. I'm saying the
We
way
are
the
saying the
blood
same thing.
formed on the actual,
Correct.
cloth, and
Yeah.
it's like that is a very lofty. Because like if you're gonna say that it's too pristine, then you would also have to try to find evidence that someone pressed it on there and made it that pristine or something of the sort. Like I feel like there'd be evidence in that direction. I really just, and listen, I understand that other people will just inherently disagree and whatnot, but like I just feel as if the counter arguments have much more of a stretch to their conclusion than the arguments for it, being that the pollen, being that it's real blood, being the negative images, being the challenge to the recent challenge to the carbon dating. And I'm not saying these things prove it, but they are more solid actual evidence to talk about versus saying this looks too perfect. It looks like someone, put this on there. It's like that's a very theoretical argument that we just can't do much with. It's like how many times have you done something in life where like you flip a pencil or something and it lands on its like head and it just stands there and you're just like, gosh, if anyone could see this right now. Like every so many times something just happens more perfectly than it would when people try to do it regularly. And it's just part of things happening. So it's just like, I just don't think it's a very good argument to try to argue against it.
Oh, absolutely not. And if we're going to play the advocate role, and there's all of these questions arising from, the arguments against the shroud being real, but yet there's claims showing carbon dating's not entirely accurate. What does all this look like for it to be too perfect? What do you mean by that? Like, and when I was referencing bloodstain seen too pristine, it's like, well, show me what it's supposed to look like then.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to like get across is like, what is your definition of pristine? When a shroud is covering a dead body, what is a blood stain supposed to, what's it supposed to look like? And when you say too pristine, does that mean it has been too perfectly preserved? Like the blood is too preserved for it being a couple thousand years old? Or is it too
When you say
pristine in a sense of its
preserved,
placement?
when you say, yeah, because like that's what I want you to differentiate because I
Because
don't
it
think
fades over time.
well, I just don't
What
think
does
in any
pristine
way,
mean?
shape, or form they would be saying pristine in terms of the blood being there. I think they're only meaning pristine in terms of the shape of the blood stain being intentionally put on there, as if someone like blotched it into there. But then the other thing is like, what would a like what how would a person know what to try to make it look like? Maybe they and
That's the
it's
thing.
well but here's the other thing is like back in that time, it was much more regular for people to deal with dead bodies than it is for us in this time. In terms like if your family member died, like you were usually the one in charge of burying them. And, it was um a lot less easy to do in terms of not actually having to get your hands dirty. So it's just, people could definitely have a better understanding of what blood would look like on a cloth, but I just feel like it's just too it's claimed to be too intentional for it to be as natural looking as it does. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Right.
it's in that
And that's
existing space of like it has like I think it's just one of those things that the cloth was just placed in the right place. The blood flow just happened to be enough. The stains have like I don't that's just a very weak argument.
extremely. And again, not saying this is, but crucifixion itself was largely or eventually became largely obsolete, effectively obsolete in most regions by about 400 AD.
Say that one more time.
So crucifixions by about 400 AD, they're using
Yeah.
CE, but we're using AD, was effectively obsolete in most regions, though rare isolated uses persisted later in different contexts. So even by 400 AD, crucifixion was largely just gone, okay, as a form of execution. So you're talking from 400 to about mid 1350s when that shroud popped up. And for those individuals saying it was a perfect replica or a painting, a piece of art, for one, even in the 1300s, 1400s, people were still not reading and writing. So for individuals to potentially go and paint a perfect replica of what a crucified body would look like in a shroud to get everything perfectly lined up, like without formal education or generally seeing what it could look like, how would they know?
Well, I just think that we can definitely throw out the argument of it being intentionally put there. I do think it is, no matter whether it was Jesus's or not, it went over an actual person who was crucified. And that I think is pretty easy to come onto that side of the argument and just say, hey, it doesn't have to be Jesus, but I do think that it
Yeah.
was a real shroud put over someone's body who was crucified. Now, where the debate stands now, the 2025, and again, I feel like this is just biased in terms of the way it's reporting this. It pisses me off. Mainstream view, the 1989 Nature radiocarbon date 1260 to 1390, plus the documented 14th century debut, anchor a medieval origin. This doesn't settle the technique of image formation, which remains unusual, but the age call is widely accepted in secular scholarship. That's the thing. I'm just like, what do you mean? That is so unfair to be like, there's these other things that don't make sense at all, but we're just going to accept the age because that's the easiest way to disassociate it with any truth. Active challenges, reanalyses point to sample/heterogeneity issues in the 14C data. Alternative physical dating and image formation physics are explored by pro-authenticity researchers, but none has overturned the 1989 result to the satisfaction of most archaeologists and physicists. That's also another annoying part. The satisfaction. Have you ever been in a debate with someone and you're like, hey, what would make this true for you? And there's literally nothing that would actually make it true for them, like to make them come to the other side. So you realize you're just arguing with someone that no matter what you say, even if you showed them actual proof, they'd still say no. And that's like what this is there's so many people that are archaeologists and physicists that are atheists, and that they're just like, no, until you can definitively show me that that is wrong, which is inherently impossible. We can only give evidence to one side or the other. Even if the evidence is on the other side, they're like, nope, it's not satisfactory enough. And I'm just like, gosh. And then the last one, forensic split. Some clinicians argue for anatomical realism. Some clinicians argue for anatomical realism. Others, notably BPA studies, argue the blood flows don't behave like a wrapped corpse, indicating staging or artistry. Expect this back and forth to continue as methods modernize. Gosh.
Yeah. As you were reading that, there's just some interesting stuff. I mean, further description of the shroud details obviously the image of a man front and back with wounds consistent with crucifixion. The image's outline, get this, is not a simple silhouette, but a complex, subtle imprint that has obviously puzzled people over many, many, many years. So further iteration to dissolve the fact that, in my opinion, it was ever a form of artwork or tapestry or whatever. It is that complex down to the craziest detail under a negative for us to be able to view all of these details. You want to talk about evidently one of the greatest artists in human history, if that is a piece of art, then we need to know this guy's name, because that is the most impressive thing that's probably ever been done. So let's toss that out the door, in my opinion.
Hold on. Those are very weak, though, and they rely mostly on bias.
As you're doing that, some of the details regarding the actual body was the facial structure, his hair, wounds, i.e. scourge marks, nail wounds in the wrists, and crazy enough, a side wound.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
So, I don't know. I think, not saying everyone who was crucified obviously did not have their side pierced, but guess who did? Yeah. Jesus.
And the other thing is, because I said, I was like, those arguments seem very lofty and opinion-based in regards to having to be convinced a dating is wrong. And, it says why the against case can feel lofty. Radiocarbon dating. This is the strongest argument for a medieval origin. 3 labs, same range, but these tests were done on one corner of the cloth, an area later shown to have undergone repairs. Oh my gosh. Reweaving, patching, contamination, reweaving, patching, and contamination from centuries of handling and the 1532 fire. Even peer-reviewed reanalysis admit that the samples weren't uniform. So while many scientists accept the medieval date, it requires confidence that the sample truly represented the whole cloth, a point still debated. Why don't we just do it again? Bloodstains don't look realistic. Forensic tests have shown both. Some find hemoglobin markers, others argue the flows don't behave like a corpse. But blood chemistry on a 2,000-year-old cloth that went through a fire is hardly straightforward science. Again,
Mm.
No records
Mm-hmm.
before 1350. Historians lean on this silence, saying it appeared out of nowhere. But there are earlier legends / images. Mandelion of Edessa, image of Camuliana, that some argue could connect. The evidence is thin, but it wasn't mentioned, therefore it didn't exist stance is also circumstantial. Pigment claims. Macron said he found paint particles. STURP said no paint formed the image. Many scholars today lean towards STURP's side. To keep claiming it's paint requires dismissing a lot of chemical and optical work. The crux of the matter. The skeptical camp relies heavily on radiocarbon dating plus historical silence. Both are valid, but neither is beyond challenge. The authenticity camp leans on the unresolved physics of the image and the questionable representativeness of the 1989 test.
Yeah.
I just feel as if the arguments against it are just going to rely fully on a lot more feeling than any actual evidence. And like to say that it's paint dismisses actual hemoglobin. To say that it's radiocarbon dating dismisses the fact it was one corner and it hasn't been done. Why don't we just do it again? Like, what is the problem with that?
Well, I can tell you probably why.
Yeah.
Because it's mainstream societies protecting the fact that they don't want to be wrong. And it's so funny that a lot of these arguments that we've read about regarding the shroud seem to be heavily, heavily subjective based and opinion based versus like actual legitimate, no, this is why ... And regarding the unexplained mechanism as to how the figure showed up, no consensus exists on how the outline was formed on the Shroud of Turin. Some theories include a chemical reaction, i.e., when a natural process like a Maillard reaction, which is where ammonia from a body reacts with the linen's carbohydrates, or oxidation, that caused the outline, supposedly. An energy burst, number 2, hypotheses of light, radiation, or an unknown energy source often tied to the resurrection, that's what caused potentially the outline of the shroud, or an artistic technique, which we've heavily shot this down so far throughout. Medieval methods like bas relief or proto-photography, though these struggle to explain the image's microscopic and 3D properties. So that one right there regarding artistic technique, no, I mean that's been heavily, heavily disproven. Multiple tests rule out conventional painting, as the image lacks brushstrokes, directionality, even significant pigment residue. Like that shouldn't even be considered at all.
That's the thing, is if if we were arguing that this was painted and it had to do with Jesus, they'd be like, well, there's no brushstrokes and there's no this and there's no that. But when it's against Jesus, they're like, oh, there's no brushstrokes.
It could be a painting.
Yeah, well, no, it could be a painting, even though we don't see any of the other evidence that it could be artistically created. And, I asked, why don't we just radiocarbon date it again? 1, the Vatican's reluctance. The shroud is owned by the Holy See and treated as a sacred relic. Every sampling requires Vatican approval. And since the 1989 test created such an uproar, they've been extremely hesitant to allow further removal of fibers. From their perspective, the cloth is fragile and unique, and they don't want it damaged further. I am not a fan of the Vatican. No. Number 2, damage and conservation concerns. The cloth is already scarred by fire, water, and centuries of handling. Scientists argue that new testing could be minimally invasive, but the Vatican fears any physical removal might worsen deterioration. And number 3, or there's actually 5 of them. Essentially the same one. After 1989, the shroud world split into camps. Pro-authenticity groups attacked the labs and methods, while skeptics dismissed believers as conspiracy-minded. The Vatican felt burned by the division, so instead of clarifying the science, they've opted for pastoral management. They let people venerate it as a symbol of Christ's suffering while avoiding scientific controversy. Oh, that's just annoying to hear. Number 4, scientific alternatives are emerging. And that's just saying that we can test it other ways. And they're still saying no. Number 5, the Pandora's box factor. If a second test contradicted the first, say it pointed to the first century, it would cause a global storm in science, religion, and media.
There
The
you
Vatican
go.
may
There you
prefer
go.
ambiguity to chaos, either disproving or reproving authenticity.
There you go. So it's all just out of the fact that people don't want to be wrong, and it might cause an uproar if it turns out to be true.
It's just like,
we're going to base a considerable finding based on the fact that people don't want to be wrong.
God, that's
a heck of a way to do things. So completely, I mean, it just goes to show what's wrong with archaeology, mainstream science, all this stuff. People are so involved and bonded to these hypotheses and theories and all this stuff that even if there's some slight interest of maybe there's a different perspective or point of view, or maybe we could have been wrong. Imagine that this entire time. Not going to happen because we don't want to risk it.
Well, I think that is just such a cop out to, like, there's something behind the scenes that's the same thing as, like, we don't want to tell people aliens are real because it would upset them. And it's just like,
who cares, dude?
Like, that's such a, like, that's like when your mom said, like, when you were a kid in the car and you're like, can we get McDonald's? And she's like, we just passed it. And you're just like, you could turn around. Like, it's not that hard. It's just like, these answers are not satisfactory in terms of actually giving anyone anything. And it's just like, on one of the most important things in the world, whether or not it could be on Jesus, it's just like, they just, but if, if the IRS is missing 35 cents from, your tax returns, they'll investigate that and for 30 years, but we can't put enough money or anything that would get the Vatican to just take one little itsy bitsy tiny fiber and do another carbio dating test. Dating test. Dude, I have been
that's just
messing my words up today.
It's tough. Audience, we're recording on a Wednesday night, so we're not always the freshest, most spicy individuals on a Wednesday night in the middle point of the work week, but we are out here grinding for all of you because we love you.
We do love you guys.
Episode. Yes,
recorded someone on Saturday just commented on our post. Thank you for sharing this, everyone. Please share it and make it go viral. That was freaking awesome.
Are you serious?
Yes.
Who is that person? We're going to give him a shout out.
And it was someone who actually previously, like, tried to say that religion isn't real. But I'm going to like her message, and we haven't liked one message on there.
I think we liked a few when we first posted it, but since it blew up, we're just like, nah, we're going to post in Ghost. We're not doing that.
I liked her message. But that's, only that one. But either way.
So generally speaking, to wrap it up, Keegan, any final thoughts on the Shroud before we cut out for this episode?
And again, for our Thoughtify thought, we didn't do any of the questions. But
second week in a row.
Yeah, good stuff.
It's a great segment. We love it.
Final thoughts on the Shroud of Turin. I do believe it was over someone, and I believe that the factors being the pierce in the side, the blood stains, and another thing that this actually didn't talk about is the blood stains have certain chemicals in them that indicate extreme trauma before dying in terms of what your body produces whenever it's going through extreme trauma. So it indicates torture of sorts. And, there's just a lot of factors that make it a very strong suggestion, but and it has nothing to do with my faith in Jesus. And I'm about 80% there, but I would need a little bit more connectivity to the time period in some way, shape, or form. And not even to the time period. I think it's already connected there. I'm just saying, like, a mention of it, or clarifying that it did come from a specific region, something that essentially puts it at the scene of the crime in some way, shape, or form, even if it's circumstantial, would be what I would need to get to the full 100%. But we'll never actually be able to be sure. It's a real shroud. It did go on top of someone. It's real blood. They were tortured, and the circumstantial evidence pointing to it being Jesus is very strong.
Yep. I mean, right there with you. I can't sum it up any better. I just hope we actually get to a point of being able to have it tested more. I mean, I think it's not, I think it would be like if we got to a point of having that tested again at some point in the near future, hopefully, and it does date and it basically points more so on top of everything we just talked about to the fact that it was potentially over Jesus in the tomb, that it would flip the world upside down. And it's just like, it's not going to change anything for us. It'd be awesome to get confirmation of that. Be like, oh, awesome. It's just not like it solidifies our belief even more, but it's just like kind of like a told you so sort of situation, based on the Bible and Jesus and everything that he's done for us in his resurrection. But it's just more ammo, to kind of go behind the argument and the fact that Jesus was a real person, died for our sins, rose from the grave, and Jesus was who he says he was and did what he said he did. And I think the Shroud, if it ends up coming out, would be more pointing to that as well.
Yeah, I would say this would be a good... Oh, dang, I didn't want to kill that spider. I didn't mean to. Hey, buddy, I'm going to let you outside. I would say that this definitely points to Jesus being a real person. I don't think it has much to do with him being divine in any way. I'm not saying that he wasn't. I'm just saying, like, there's two separate arguments. Was Jesus a real person? And was he the divine, God and Son of God at the same time? I think this more substantiates him being a real person than anything else. The only thing that would further do that is the lighting on it, but that is still to be, still being heavily debated.
Yeah, that energy burst, if that hypothesis of light radiation or some energy source, that kind of beamed through it, causing that reflection on the shroud.
Yeah,
just be
for sure.
Outlined like that, especially in all that detail. It's pretty interesting stuff. But all that to say, we hope you found this, I would say, Thoughtify thought segment interesting, even though we didn't really get through it all. But interesting stuff nonetheless. Again, we're not saying it is. We're not saying it isn't. We're just talking about it, and it does not shake the fact that we believe Jesus is our Lord and Savior. So we're not ashamed to admit that. We will continue to talk about it, and we just appreciate you guys tuning in for supporting us all this way. And we love talking about stuff like this. So we're just going to keep going with it.
100 P. It was a fun one. I do think we got through the argument in general. We talked about the for, the against, and where it stands today. So, let us know how you guys feel. We're going to make some great clips out of this one. And as always, we enjoyed it. And we'll be back next week for another solid episode.
Absolutely. Have a good week, guys.
Have a good one, guys. Peace.